request you, Dr. Shetty is also in the call, but perhaps will join in at 4 sharp. We have Mr. Pani Nagraj, who's been helping us. Uh, Rajiv is here. He would be the one doing the honors in terms of introducing Dr. Shetty. Of course, a man of his accomplishment and achievements needs very little introduction, but that makes it all the more challenging. Kindly join in by an audio. The spotlight will be on Dr. Shetty. The format of this Mandara is going to be after Rajiv introduces Dr. Shetty. He will talk to us, address us on the very relevant and important topic of disruptions in digital healthcare. And it will be about a 25-minute talk by someone who's made a mark in this field. After that, we'll have time for questions. In terms of asking the questions, might I suggest that we follow a discipline and we put all the questions in the chat window in MS Teams. And one of my team members or me will take up the question and direct it to Dr. Shetty. We will answer as many questions as his schedule permits. I understand he's extremely busy today with a lot of clinical engagements. We're about 2 minutes into the event. We will be centrally muting everybody except for the speakers. Thank you so much for joining in.
Good evening, Dr. Shetty. How are you?
Hello.
I hope you're doing well.
Thanks, Rajiv. How are you? Last time when you came, I missed you.
That is true. I guess you had to rush for an urgent meeting. So, first of all, thank you so much for addressing us today from your busy schedule. We really appreciate that.
My privilege, Rajiv. My privilege.
Thank you so much. I think Swami should start sharp at 4.
Yes, we've got a minute. Dr. Shetty, thank you so much for addressing us. I've had the honor of speaking on the same platform with you many years back. You spoke about Paura Karmikas that day. And the one
yes.
This was for Business Week, and Dr. Subrata Bakshi had called us. It was brilliant listening to you. We look forward to a wonderful session with you.
Thanks.
So it's about a minute. We will start, as Rajiv, our chairman, has said, sharp 4. We value your time. Pani has told us that you've been very busy today. So without further ado, I request Rajiv to introduce Dr. Devi Shetty to us. And thank you, Dr. Shetty, once again for accepting to speak to us on Mandara. Over to you, Rajiv.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Swami. So I'm extremely delighted to introduce one of the best known ambassadors of delivering innovation in healthcare. I think Dr. Devi Shetty doesn't need an introduction, but it's interesting to bring out some of the things that we may not know about. Of course, he's a cardiac surgeon, as well as a very successful entrepreneur, a rare combination in today's world. He's highly respected luminary for his ingenious ideas for reforms in healthcare sector. His visionary leadership has to make quality healthcare affordable for all has drawn global recognition. His pioneering work has resulted in institutions being the subject of case studies for Harvard Business School and Wall Street Journal. Among his many notable initiatives, an outstanding contribution is the work done by Dr. Shetty in association with Government of Karnataka to bring inexpensive micro health insurance that more than 3.4 million rural people benefit from. Dr. Shetty is a current chairman of board of governors at IIM Bangalore. Dr. Shetty is also sought after by the government of many countries to contribute his wisdom on global policy initiatives for delivering effective healthcare. He was part of international advisory group to address the global health agenda under Japan's G20 leadership during 2019-2020. A strong advocate of technology for efficient healthcare delivery, Dr. Shetty takes deep interest in creating and developing software products and applications to achieve time and cost efficiency while minimizing clinical errors in healthcare delivery. Dr. Shetty also has US patent for a computer implemented method for facilitating delivery of patient care in adherence with the standard clinical protocol. Dr. Shetty is a recipient of several prestigious awards, including the Padma Bhushan, Padma Shri, the Economist Innovation Award, Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, Financial Times ArcelorMittal Boldness in Business Award, Nikkei Asia Prize for Economic and Business Innovation. He has also been awarded honorary doctorate from University of Minnesota, University of Mysuru, and IIT Madras. Let us listen to you, Dr. Sethi, as you can inspire us with your talk on digital disruption in healthcare. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajiv. First of all, I want to thank you for your contribution for preparing all of us to face the dreadful COVID second wave. Thank you so much. The COVID, we only talk about the worst thing what COVID has done to us. But after maybe 50 or 100 years from now, when historians are going to talk about evolution of the society, there will be two distinct periods. One is BC, that is before COVID. Other one is AC, which is after COVID. The world we are going to face after COVID is going to be dramatically different than the world in which we entered this the pre-COVID period. I can only talk about my industry, that is the healthcare industry. And I would like to discuss with you because all of you are going to be very, very integral part of healthcare delivery across the world. You may not be aware, but hopefully I should be able to ignite some young minds to think in that direction among the pool of talented people I'm going to address. First of all, I would like to tell all of you that I will ask a question, which is the largest industry in the world in terms of money spent? Is it IT industry, it is oil industry, or an automobile industry? Some of you may not even know that global healthcare and wellness industry is now about 8.4 or 8.5 trillion dollar industry. It is the largest industry in the world. The second largest industry in the world, which some of you may not know, is the agro industry, the food industry. That is much smaller. It's, I think, about $8.2 trillion. We spend more money in keeping ourselves healthy than eating. The IT industry is $3.4 trillion for your information. Automobile industry is about $2 trillion. Oil and natural gas is again $3 trillion. They are nothing compared to healthcare industry. But the sad thing is, after spending the highest quantum of money available, less than 20% of the world's population has access to safe, affordable, accessible healthcare. This is the tragedy, and it can't go on. We have to make healthcare affordable, accessible, and safer for everyone. Now, I'll just talk to you about one of the government initiative which was launched recently. Some of you may not be aware, is that Unique Health ID was launched by the government. Now, as usual, we are all skeptics about the government launch scheme. But what is the implication? The implication is that your parents, your grandparents, I'm sure you would have seen them running around with thick files containing all their medical record in a jumbled up manner. No doctor can decipher them, but they contain vital medical data. Medical records are a lot more important than the data records you have. But unfortunately, they're all on a paper. And most of the time gets lost, misplaced. All that is going to be a history when we follow the government strategy of Unique Health ID. All of us will be able to store our medical records on the cloud. I'm not sure whether one of your parents or a grandparents had an angiogram. After the angiogram, hospitals generously give you a CD. But what do you do with the CD? Today, how many laptops and computers have a CD drive? And the maximum life of a CD is not more than 6 months or 1 year. It gets broken. It gets scratched. Today, with the launching of the Unique Health ID, you will be able to store all these angiogram films, CT scan report, MRI report in the cloud, and you will be given a link which can be stored in your mobile phone. When you go to your doctor, all you have to do is to give the link, and the doctor will be able to see the image. And this is very, very important because in medicine, when we are diagnosing, we like to see the trend. And trend can be only seen if we have the old images compared to the new images. And that privilege we do not have today. So now why COVID is such a big event in the societal development? Before anyone heard cloud computing, those days, I think around 12, 15 years ago, cloud was only meant what brought us rain. At that time, Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, gave us the satellite link up, and I have personally treated 53,000 heart patients in the last 20 years. Before COVID, before the cloud and the internet became a reality. But all those patients I treated was illegal. Telemedicine was illegal on one hand. On the other hand, all our state governments, central governments were busy promoting telemedicine, but it was illegal. Then 1 week after COVID started hitting the country, telemedicine became legal. But for COVID, I can tell you that even now it wouldn't have been legalized. In no time, it got legalized. Today, we are in a privileged position to see our patients in remote locations. Why should a patient to see a doctor visit the clinic? It is a tremendous waste of time. I have been practicing in India now for more than 30 years. Thousands of people had a heart operation. Why should they make a pilgrimage from Calcutta, from Mizoram, from all the northeastern hill states? They planned this journey for 1 year just to see me for 3 minutes. Is it really required? I distinctly remember when the telemedicine became a reality, I was seeing a lady sitting in her bedroom in Calcutta. 75-year-old lady was operated by me about 20 years ago. Every year she came to Bangalore, and now she is old. Her children were busy. So somehow she came to know I see them online. And the first 2 minutes, she couldn't stop crying because the effort involved in talking to me. Today, she's sitting in a bedroom and talking to me. That is what is called as a magical transformation of the healthcare services. And all these are possible. It has happened in every sphere of life. It hasn't happened in healthcare. Why? Because those of us who are in a position to change the things, healthcare comes to us anyway. We don't need to bother. And also, we as a society, the so-called elitist or educated society, we always look at the needs of everyone with our prism. But the reality is different. I have been seeing patients now for so many years coming from all over. I get over 100 emails every day for appointments. And automatically the reply goes to them that please scan all your medical records and email it to Dr. Devi Shetty. And email number is given. Did we ever think that how many people have a scanner at home? How many 60-year-old, 70-year-old people have scanner at home? I don't think even 1% of Indian population has a scanner at home. Now, even if they have a scanner, how many 60-year-old people can scan the document and send it to us? And even if they are able to do it, the tragedy is most of these people, they reply by email, but they don't have an email number. Somebody has created an email ID only for that occasion. And when I reply, half the time, that email doesn't reach them because the person who created the email ID for them has disappeared and they have no idea. So when they come back to me, they keep telling me 5 times I sent you a mail, you didn't reply. Then we show them 5 copies that I replied every email and every time you had a new email ID. This is the reality of the country. This is the reality of 70% of the country's population. So I have a simple rule now. I just tell my colleagues that our email back to them should say that put all your medical records on the floor of your house and take your WhatsApp camera. This is my WhatsApp number. Take a photograph and it will come to me directly. And next day morning in WhatsApp video, I will see you. That's it. I am not promoting WhatsApp. All I am trying to do is to reach out to the people, understand their problem and come up with a solution which has no friction. And this is all about technology, how it can disrupt healthcare. Now, coming back to the how disruption can happen, I have no doubt that within the next 5 years, smart software will make smarter diagnosis than doctors. And within maybe 7 years, 10 years, it will become legally mandatory for every doctor to get the second opinion from the software before starting the treatment. It is going to happen. Now, I keep giving this 5-year, 7-year moratorium, knowing fully well that it's going to happen much earlier. I just don't want my colleagues to shoot me down. That's the only reason I give this 5 years, 7 years. All of them of my age will think, oh, by the time we are retiring, so it doesn't matter to us. This is the power of technology. Because why technology is important? Some of you of my age, I'm sure, when you were kids, when you went to bank, there were ledgers there, and everybody's money was kept safely with all the documents on the paper. Today, can they run a bank with the paper and a pen? It's not possible because the millions of people are transacting in the bank. When my teachers were treating patients, the data was not more than 5 to 10. They took the history, they examined the patient, and if they're lucky, they got a chest X-ray. That's all. And nothing was available. Even when I was graduating, ultrasound was not in India. Forget about CT scan, MRI. Today, when a patient is sitting in front of me, I have details about each and every cell of his body. And this data is enormous. No human mind can decipher all the data and come to the plan within 5 minutes or 10 minutes of time. It's not possible. So if we really want to offer a safe healthcare, we have to embrace technology. Now, are we ready for the technology? I just want to, it's generally in other parts of the world, technology moves very fast and then the people adopt themselves. But in India, it's other way around. I just want to let you know, doctors haven't started prescribing on a digital prescription pad. Doctors yet haven't embraced technology. But the Chief Justice of Uttarakhand High Court 5 years ago gave a judgment that in state of Uttarakhand, no doctor can prescribe medicine on a paper 5 years ago. Of course, they couldn't implement the judgment because there was no technology tools available. But if doctors do not want to change, it doesn't matter. Society and the system will force us to change, and it's a matter of time. Now, why digitization is important? Digitization is important because if doctors and nurses, technicians abandon pen and paper and embrace smart digital technologies, believe me, healthcare will become safer for the patient. Today, people think that hospitals are safe for the patients. It is not. Let's look at American hospitals, which are considered as some of the safest hospitals on the planet. If 200 patients get admitted to an American hospital and spend one night, 1 in 200 dies due to medical error. Not medical negligence, medical error. Why medical error happens? Because when a patient is unwell in the hospital, a lot of data keeps coming from 100 different areas. Some data come from the machines, imaging machines, some data comes from the lab, some data comes from different team members, but they're all in silos. It doesn't reach the right person at the right time. So Joint Commission of US, which is you would have heard of JCI, Joint Commission of US, which is a body which accredits American hospitals. Without JCI accreditation, you can't run the hospital. Their study revealed that 65% of the sentinel events, accidents happening in the hospital, which eventually leads to patient's death, is due to communication failure. What is communication failure? When a blood test reports something grossly abnormal and doctors see it after 4 hours. And in between that, they prescribe some medicine which may damage the kidney or liver. So, American hospital, which are the safest hospital, 1 in 200 dies due to medical error just by spending one night in American hospital. In fact, the getting admitted in American hospital is 10 times riskier than skydiving. Now, why this is happening? This is happening because every hospital has their own protocol process. They're all on a piece of paper. And patient requires a constant care, and doctors are always moving. All they need to do is to move the electronic medical record from the laptop to a mobile phone. And if they can do that, believe me, millions of lives can be saved. So there are few criteria you need to understand about the doctors before you design an electronic medical record for them. Let me talk about the $1 billion EMRs, what is used in US today. Doctors hate them. They may be costing billions of dollars. EMR is one of the top third or fourth reason for physician burnout in US. Because these EMRs were developed as billing software, which was then modified to fit in the requirement of the doctor. Then, why doctors are so special? Doctors are special because of our style of working or our attitude. One is, you cannot produce a EMR with a keypad for us to type because doctors are not designed by God to type. So if you're going to design a EMR, it has to have only tapping, touching. And if you expect us to sit in a classroom for 76 hours to learn how to use the EMR, forget it. We do not like to read instruction manuals. It has to be intuitive. And we do not like 100 different things popping up on the screen. We want a clean screen. That's the reason most doctors in the world use iPhone, because this is very intuitive. It has no instruction manual. And this is what you should think about when you're developing a product for us. And the next requirement, develop the product not for the desktop, develop it for a mobile phone. Because doctors look at the desktop 5 to 6 times in a day, but doctors look at their mobile phone 200 times in a day. So it has to be on a mobile phone. And every doctor is used to the way the mobile phone functions. So essentially, we believe that India has a great opportunity to build this kind of a EMR, because we have brilliant software engineers like all of you, and we have great doctors. It is a phenomenal combination. So how is the future hospital is going to be in India? I can tell you that within the next 1 or 2 years' time, when you walk into a hospital, you will come across a reception counter with no receptionist, because most of the work done by the receptionist would have been done previous day by the receptionist calling the patient from home, receptionist at home, patient at home. The registration, payment, everything happens online. So patient will just have a number of the doctor's office and what time they should go, they will go and see the doctor. And when the patient is going to sit in front of the doctor, traditionally, doctor will ask a question, what is wrong with you? Then if the patient says chest pain, how long it's been going on? It is going to be dramatically different. Doctor has every information about you when you are sitting in front of him, because the previous day, doctor's assistant would have called you at home. They would have taken the copy of all your medical records. They have entered your entire history in the system. So instead of doctor asking you a question, what is wrong with you? He will be telling you that, look, you had chest pain 3 months ago. You had then got admitted to a hospital. You had an angiogram, angioplasty. And you're expected to only tell the doctor if that information is inaccurate, which he will correct. So that will leave behind such a good impression. Imagine you're sitting in front of a doctor. He has got entire knowledge about at what age you had appendicectomy, what age you had a tonsillectomy, and what are you allergic to, your hobbies, everything he knows. It's a unique experience. So essentially, you will have a different experience in the OPD. Then you walk into the hospital. You'll have massive ICUs with 50 bed, 100 beds. But at night, there are no intensivists. Where are the intensivists? Intensivists will be doing only 4-hour slots sitting at home. They can see the patient in front on their TV. They will be able to get virtually every data. Now, when this happens, is the outcome going to be exactly how it is today when the intensivist is in the ICU? Believe me, it will be 100 miles ahead of the current reports. The mortality and morbidity in the ICU will come down dramatically. How that will happen? It will happen because when you say in a hospital, somebody had a cardiac arrest, and the term used in hospital is he had a sudden cardiac arrest. That means a person was perfectly well, had a cardiac arrest, and he couldn't be resuscitated. The question about sorry, I got distracted by the question which appeared. Sorry. So how it will be far superior? It will be far superior mainly because before the cardiac arrest, 6 to 10 hours before the cardiac arrest, many subtle things start happening in the body. First thing is urine output starts tailing off, central pressure starts going up, peripheral temperature starts going down, and the patient gets a little bit restless, and then you do the blood gases, the acidosis sets in. All those things will tell you. We have in our system analytic tools that can predict heart attack at least 24 hours before the event. So essentially all these tools will be available for a doctor sitting in his home, and he is not treating cardiac arrest. His job is to prevent the cardiac arrest. So the whole purpose of critical care, the strategy will undergo dramatic change. Then coming back to today there are so many we call as a shifting girls. There are so many girls taking one blood sample from point A to point B, taking one file from one place to the other, bringing blood from the blood bank or taking away blood sample to the lab. All these will be replaced by very inexpensive robots, which will keep on moving from point A to point B, because COVID has taught us that hospital is not a safe place for people to work. And as we have more people working in our ICUs, the chances of them bringing more infection inside is higher. At the same time, them getting infected is also higher. So all this activity will be changed by robots. Now, who's going to design these robots? I guess it will be some of you sitting there, I'm sure, will be the people who think about why this large-scale adoption hasn't happened. Because I have been interacting with hundreds of robot companies. Their idea of a robot is something which costs minimum 25 to 30 lakh rupees. When I can walk into any toy shop and I can buy the most smartest, the planes and the cars and everything costing 30,000, 50,000 rupees, which can easily do my job. Because shifting a blood sample from point A to point B doesn't require a lot of intelligence. And even if it breaks down, it doesn't matter, nobody's going to die. So I just need a toy robot to shift these samples. So essentially, I can go on like this for endless hours. I think I just want to just tell you a few things, and before I close, all the consultation, irrespective of the seriousness of the consultation, whether it's for a headache, tummy ache, cancer, or a heart disease, first-time consultation will happen online. You will see your doctor sitting in your car or in your office, and you're not going to tell your boss that I'm going to apply for leave tomorrow because I have to take my wife or a kid to see the doctor. That is going to be a history. You're going to see all of them. You're sitting in your office and your child is at home, and you consult the doctor, and doctor will see the child with somebody else holding the phone against the child's face. And then doctor will be, because he or she will have every details about your child before the consultation happens. So this is the way the interaction between the doctor and the patient is going to happen. And most of the diseases like diabetes will be managed online. We have more than 10,000 diabetic patients who are treated online by our diabetologist. And we notice that a patient who agreed to be treated online for diabetes, their blood sugar level is much better controlled than a patient who insists on seeing the doctor, who wants doctor's touch. I agree, I am a very strong proponent of the human touch, but it is a luxury. Is it really required? It is not required most of the time, but it is not important at all. It is important. So essentially, essentially you can buy a Mercedes and take you from your house to the office, but at the same time, you can buy a Maruti and it also can take you safely. So whatever is suitable for you, let's provide the options. So let me just end now because I have to see a lot of patients. So I just want to give you the final message. The final message is world's largest accommodation provider, that is Airbnb, doesn't own any real estate. World's largest transport agency, Uber, doesn't own any cars. Facebook, one of the largest content providers, doesn't produce any contents. Alibaba, world's largest retail company, has no inventory. And world's largest healthcare provider will have no beds. It's going to be a software. And it is up to all of you to design that software. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Shetty. That was inspiring to know how this $8.4 trillion industry is going to digitally transform. I liked like it's IPL season, so like a decision review system, we're going to have a diagnostic review system, I guess, which will be done by intelligence and robots. So we have a couple of questions for you, sir. You answered the one on human touch. You said it's a luxury and it will be minimally used. There's one question, maybe your inspiration will be valuable here. Do you think we have room in healthcare technology instrumentation outside the big three, GE, Siemens, and Philips, who kind of rule the world? Do you see disruptions happening in India specifically?
I have no doubt about it because I have seen Indian education institutions, especially technology education institutes, getting into that area. You are aware of the IIT Kanpur. IIT Kanpur has an ambitious plan to develop artificial heart, left ventricular assist device. Now, it may sound as if, whether they will be able to do it or whether a country like India should think about it. I strongly feel time has come for us to plan big things. And I have no doubt that they will succeed. Why they will succeed? First of all, heart is among all the organs of the body, it is one of the easiest organ to duplicate. Because heart really, contrary to all your imagination, heart has no intelligent functions. It is a pump. You put in 3 liters, it will pump out 3 liters. You put in 5 liters, it will pump out 5 liters. All we have to do is to have a pump which will pump out about 5 liters per minute without getting clotted and without stopping. And it has been done, and we have been implanting artificial hearts for the last 14 years. And these patients are leading virtually, I wouldn't say normal life. For their age, it's a relatively normal life. So it is possible. And I have no doubt that Indian Institute of the IIT Kanpur will be able to develop it. And they want to develop it within 2 years. So like this, there are many, many institutions which have come forward with all these, the grandeur ideas. And this is the way country will progress, because I can take a bet within the next 10 years across the world, more people will have an artificial heart than the pacemaker. That is the market we are looking at. And this artificial heart today costs 70 lakh rupees, 80 lakh rupees. How many people can afford to have it?
Inspiring, sir. We have one of our employees, Anuradha, who does a lot of work for social responsibility, saying she was really inspired by your words and putting technology to use. There's one other question for you. It's been asked a number of times. Why do we need specific health IDs when we already have multiple IDs like Aadhaar? I'm sure you can throw some light on it.
Yeah, no, I'm not able to really answer from the technical point of view. I guess they didn't want to jumble things together, because a lot of people are concerned about their privacy. A lot of people may not like to keep their data in the, public, this one like this. If they don't want to keep it, it's fine. I think that could be the reason, but I will find out. Now that somebody has asked me the question, let me find out why they couldn't use the Aadhaar number instead of a separate number. Yeah.
Fair point, sir. So do you think that under this holistic schemes like Ayush, practice of multiple disciplines like Ayurveda, Allopathy, Unani, all of them could really come together for wellness?
I have no doubt that, we have our own strengths, and we do not have solutions for a lot of problems, especially chronic illnesses. And I am a very, very strong advocate of yoga as adjuvant therapy for every heart patient. I have no doubt, because the yoga can, when people reach the age of 50, 55, 60, it is very common for them to develop pain in the knee, pain in the ankle, backache. Believe me, yoga can at least cure half of them, may not be all of them. I have no doubt. And my personal experience, I stand like a horse. My wife calls me as a horse because I can stand for 10 hours, 12 hours. And I started getting pain in my knee. And my wife insisted I see a yoga teacher, her yoga teacher, and I refused. I was a bodybuilder, I was a health fanatic, and I just wanted to, I thought that yoga is for old, retired, weak people. And she said, nothing doing. First of all, you're not that young, and you better take the. But when pain became unbearable, I started yoga 5 years ago. I can tell you in 3 months, I forgot which knee of mine was hurting. Yeah, it is amazing. I have no doubt. And I am a very strong advocate of any therapy which can give relief without hurting you. We should welcome. We shouldn't have a closed mind.
That's a very broad and beautiful answer. So one more thing that's come with so much of advancements in technology and this industry being about 8.5 trillion, would there be a quantum shift that doctors get incentivized and paid for preventing illness rather than curing? Would there be a way to approach positive health?
This is the way healthcare should be moving. I'll give an example. Kaiser Permanente is a healthcare provider in California area, and I'm a great admirer. The CEO, the previous CEO of Kaiser Permanente, is a very dear friend, and I admire their model because what they do, like an insurance company, they take the premium at the beginning of the year. And they work very, very hard for 365 days to make sure that you don't fall sick. So your interest and their interest is aligned. Today, it is not aligned. As a healthcare provider, if more people fall sick, it is good for my business, but it is not good for my customer. So whenever there is a misalignment of the goal, in the end, both parties are unhappy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I would like to know if you can take one more question or.
Yeah, I'll take one more question. Yes.
So you've done a lot of pioneering work in multiple things. Of late, there's also been a big shift towards making cancer care affordable to people, because this is something that's hitting people across the spectrum. Any views on how you're going to make this also hopefully forgettable, and for the unlucky few who get it, and which is now increasing, how would you make their life a little simpler?
See, the reason why cancer care is expensive is because you will be surprised with my answer, there are very few cancer specialists. So there are very few in a country like India, there won't be more than 1,000 people or maybe 1,500 people who can prescribe very potent, very powerful anti-cancer drugs. So because the shortage, very few people get the right treatment and the right prescription. So the drug industry, with the bulk of the cost of cancer treatment, is the cost of medicine. Since across the world, there are very, very few people prescribing these drugs, these medicines are not sold in large numbers. Unless that happens, the cost of these medicines will not come down. So essentially, we need to train a lot more people, and the cancer screening should happen like a routine. In India, there is no culture of people going in for health checkup. A 65-year-old man, if he develops a heart problem, when he comes to me, he's very proudly saying that I never saw a doctor in my life. He thinks it is an achievement. We have to change our mindset. We have to say that you buy one new car, first 1 or 2 years, it doesn't need any maintenance. But after that, again, you say, I will never take it to a preventive maintenance. One day it will stop in the middle of the road. So body is no different. Yeah. So essentially people, why I am so bullish on online healthcare. I'll give an example. 30% of the cancers in India are head and neck cancers. That is cancer of the tongue, and the throat, neck, because of our pan chewing, gudka, and all these habits. Now, you don't need any biopsy to diagnose the cancer of the tongue or a cancer of the cheek or a cancer in the neck. One look at the patient, doctor will know. So my dream is that if online healthcare becomes a reality, a villager who has an ulcer in the tongue, which is totally painless, if he happens to consult a doctor and all he has to do is to put his tongue out, one look at the tongue, doctor will know it is cancer. And if it is diagnosed at that stage with hardly some 10,000 rupees treatment, he or she will be cured. Wait for 2 years with the lymph nodes everywhere it spread, you spend $1 million. You have a mutilated face and a dead body at the end of 3 years. That is the beauty of preventive care or an early detection. And all this will change once people accept online healthcare and consult doctors even for trivial things. Doesn't matter.
Thank you, Dr. Shetty. I think we have taken a considerable amount of time amidst your busy practice.
I enjoyed it.
It's
Thank
true.
you so much.
And I hope that some people in SAS can respond to your challenge in terms of building an intuitive EMR system and or something that can help in diagnosis and the advancements that you think are going to make human life a lot better. Every SASian, including our chairman and everyone present here and those not present here who will be seeing the video recording, thanks the health community, all of you, for the wonderful care that you have taken, the selfless service, sometimes at the cost of many doctors' lives, for tiding us through this phase of Corona. And in fact, even before that, you've been treating us and you're responsible for our well-being. Thank you so much. Our prayers to every one of your fraternity, including the extended caregiver system at Narayana and all the other associated hospitals. Thank you very much, sir, for inspiring us.
Thanks, Rajiv. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, one and all. Have a pleasant evening.
Bye, Shetty.